But yeah, so hi everybody, welcome to Black Breastfeeding Week 2021 over here in the UK. I am Ruth Dennison. I am a doula, founder and director at One to One Doula and Breastfeeding Support. And from the back of me working as a doula, I then started to build up this campaign for Black Breastfeeding Week. And because I related to it, it's something, breastfeeding is something that I've always been doing since 2007. As soon as I went into maternity care after working with families, I then shone to breastfeeding. It was something that was lacking support and was something that was really, really needed, especially when you're noticing young babies that are just born going into special care due to having issues with breastfeeding. This made me realize how important it was and how much we needed to really do more to help the mothers that wanted to feed their babies. And with breast milk, may I say, all mums want to feed their baby but want to breastfeed. And yeah, so this was what then helped me to create another campaign, which was Breaking Breastfeeding Barriers. I came from doing that in regards to me solely putting my money together, putting all the efforts in to help make and create the events for Black Breastfeeding Week. I felt that it's a community issue and it should have the community getting involved as much as they can to help make these changes. It shouldn't be something that I'm doing on my own. And that's where I built up the initiative to help raise funds for breaking breastfeeding barriers, to help actually, break these barriers in breastfeeding for Black families. And this is where we are today. So I'd like to thank you all for coming and attending to this event, which is very much important to me. And I can see it's also important to you all. That's why you're here today. Um, so what I want to discuss is why breastfeeding cultural safety matters. And yeah, it matters a lot, which is why I've created a course within breastfeeding culture safety. It's something that I thought about for some time, and all of this stuff that's happened with George Floyd really just triggered everything off. There were so many people that was asking these questions that have no idea of what is happening in the Black community, and sometimes Black people themselves not really wanting to speak on the subject because it's something we've been dealing with throughout our whole life. It's something that sometimes some of us has actually become neutral to these feelings of being treated less than, and just sort of get on with it or try to not highlight it as an issue within there, or sometimes just turn a blind eye to it because it's something that has been there throughout majority of our lives. And as much as we feel that things have gotten better from our parents and our grandparents, but we are actually still having the repercussions of the issues of racism and biases within our society and within this country. As much as it may not be blatant, it is something we are dealing with. As soon as our babies are born, we're dealing with it within the hospitals, we're dealing with it when we start school, and we're dealing with it within our workspaces. And then when we go to give birth and our children give birth, we are continuously dealing with issues of our culture, where our backgrounds, our cultures, our languages, the colors of our skin, where we are dealing with the issues and having to navigate, and sometimes navigating and sometimes even pretending to be someone you're not, just to be able to navigate through the system in the best way possible. Um, so there's many reasons of why it's important to address these situations. Is to not only to educate white people on how to support breastfeeding with mothers safely, but also for other people to realize that their culture shouldn't even be a barrier. Why should it be a barrier? We are in a multicultural country which has different people, and if your culture doesn't fit with someone, there is somebody else that will be able to support you. So why should we deflect from breastfeeding because of our culture? And the more we speak about it, the more we humanize it, and the more we normalize this issues that are lying within the culture of breastfeeding. So in regards to culture safety, there's different ways that it can affect us. If there's the positive impact and the principles, in regards to cultural safety, it would help us to, really recognize the different cultural identities of others and meet their needs and expectations. So even though you may feel that Black people have these issues, every Black person don't always have the same cultural background. So you may have West Indians, Caribbeans, Africans that have different cultural backgrounds, different cultural traditions which they do after birth, and different influences through their family, through their relatives, and through their friends. So it's good to sometimes not just assume and put everyone into one box that you are Black and this is the way of you doing things. It's about asking them as an individual, if it's to do with breastfeeding, how would you like to feed your baby? What was your experiences with your parents and breastfeeding? Have you seen anyone? Have you got friends and family who breastfeed? How will you be supported within your home or within your environment? What do they know about breastfeeding apart from putting baby onto the breast? What do they know about breastfeeding? Because of everyone has different perspectives in regards to how they view breastfeeding. So one mentioned earlier that there's a culture where they feel that they don't have breast milk, and so they don't breastfeed their babies until their breast milk comes in. But there's also some cultures that think that not only that they don't have breast milk, that they think their breast milk or the colostrum is dirty. And there's different perspectives from different cultures. So it's about really listening to that person as an individual, asking them their perspective of how they want to feed their babies, see what barriers there is, and just giving them that information and evidence-based information so they can truly make an informed choice, and that their choices of how they feed their baby isn't to do with the care that they was given, or to do with the environment that they was living in, or to do with influences from their family, but it's to do with the knowledge that they also gained through navigating through our maternity system. And sometimes, if you don't feel that you do have a big practice that can really elevate and lift up the differences or the voices or the information that you're sharing around breastfeeding, sometimes it is imagery would help to attract people that you can use. If it's on social media, you can use different imagery that respects their culture, and just to also know that you don't always get it right. It's okay to ask your audience, so you can learn. Also, it's okay to ask different practitioners from different ethnic backgrounds so you can learn from them. Like I would say that, like, I may know more about the Black community, but there is a lot of different other cultures that I can always learn from. So we can always learn from one another, and the way to learn from each other is to listen and to ask questions. There is also a negative way of reflecting on culture. If you looking at culture from what's been stereotyped on the TV in regards to Black people being bad, being aggressive, and different things like that is how are identifying Black people, then that is going to cause a barrier to why you may not be supporting these parents as much as you could be supporting them, because of you've got the stereotype in your head that maybe that that they just have loads of milk and they will feed their babies, they never have any problems with breastfeeding. But you need to ask these mums. You've got to realize that sometimes the quiet mothers are not the mothers that are just that's the ones that are getting on well with their babies. So it's just sometimes personality, and it doesn't mean that you would then shy away from offering or speaking to that mother and asking her how she may want to feed her baby, how you can support that mother, and really helping them not only after they've had their baby, but sometimes thinking about ways of reaching out to different communities and different cultures antenatally would help them to know what they want to do once baby is born. Once baby is born, sometimes it can be the hardest time to think about all these different things of when you have a baby that is crying in your arms and wanting to feed. And so even though it's better late than never, the more that we can get information out to all mothers and Black mothers earlier, the better. And if you can see the bottom, I put my quote as breastfeeding practitioners, we need to recognize these barriers of different cultures that different cultures face within their community. When you recognize these barriers, then you'll be able to navigate through these barriers and release these barriers from, helping and preventing these mums from breastfeeding their babies. So one of the things that I know that a lot of practitioners, especially white practitioners, may not notice within breastfeeding the is the incidence of any skin problems within darker skin tones. So if there's any breastfeeding problems that's relating to sore nipples or mastitis or any of these things, that a lot of the time you are unaware of these things. So when you are asking, you've got to really think about the language that you're using when you are asking a black mother that has come to you, if she has come to you to say that she's having problems with breastfeeding, making sure that you are asking questions that would relate to her and her skin tone. So such things as, asking her, where does she feel the pain? How does the pain feel? What sensations is she feeling? What's felt different while she's feeding her baby? Instead of using things like, have you got a red patch on your skin? Because of a lot of darker skin tone, women do not have, or people do not have red patches that will show up on their skin. And there's also, just really trying to think about, you know, sorry, I just skipped thinking about the sizes of the breast instead of thinking that all breasts, because I have heard mums practitioners say that all black women have really big breasts and big nipples. They will be fine with, they don't have any problems with breastfeeding. But if you can look at this picture here, this does not show a mother with really big nipples, and it just goes to show that if you have that stereotype and you are thinking these things, then how are you going to be able to feel that you can support a mum? Like, depending on your size of your breast doesn't mean that if you can latch your baby on or not. Even if you do have big nipples, it doesn't mean that everything will be going sailing fine with you with breastfeeding your baby. And there's lots of different issues of why sometimes mums may not be able to latch their babies on, and sometimes it's not always to do with the parents of the mother's breast. Sometimes it could be other things such as tongue tie, which Carmel will speak to you guys more about later on. But these myths of what you've heard, you have to unpack those myths, and you need to take each mother as they are and speak to the mother more directly about her symptoms and what she may be experiencing with feeding. And you know, just really having pictures like this can make a difference of, you understanding of what's to expect. That every mother has different breasts, no matter their colors, and that you can't assume, make these assumptions that because of black people have big families, make the assumption that big families would mean that they have lots of breastfeeding support. You've got to remember they may have big families, but there's a reason why we have jobs as lactation consultants and jobs as breastfeeding supporters, because of they're not going to know the technical side of things. They're not going to know, the actual physical physiology about breastfeeding. They're not going to know these things. Yes, we all know that you put babies on the breast, but what's happened within our communities, we don't have our sisters around us supporting us and being next to us breastfeeding as we may have done many years ago. And without having that, we don't know. A lot of the time when we are coming into breastfeeding, it is our own journey. And sometimes, there is a lot of aunties that would say you just got to get through the pain. And we all know well, not we all, but a lot of us do know how painful it can be when a baby is not feeding and latched onto the breast correctly. And not only is it painful, is that it can help reduce the baby's weight gain, because if it is painful, then there's a problem with maybe possibly the way that the milk is coming out of the breast. and then it's a knock-on effect. The baby's upset, crying at mum's sore, and they're more likely to give up without having that support. So we've got to stop assuming that people with big families have lots of breastfeeding support. They haven't got the breastfeeding professionals within their families that are helping them. And as you can see, when you are working, if you are working as a practitioner, if you can see around you, a lot of the time that the breastfeeding practitioner next to you looks is also a white practitioner. So therefore, if you are not seeing many black practitioners, where they're not just hiding in our families. So you've got to also bear that in mind, that as much as we do have a lot of family sometimes, and making the assumptions that they're getting their breastfeeding support is not good enough. So we need to really stray away from that. And also just to realize that, yes, there is, you can have a look at these pictures here. You can see this lady here wanted to give up. Her nipples were extremely cracked and extremely sore. But if you saw her breasts looking like that, would you think that her breasts were extremely sore? Like, there's an assumption that black people don't feel pain. So sometimes, this is something that has come from slavery, where they used to do lots of practices on our bodies without pain relief, assuming that we don't feel pain. And this is still trickling down within the NHS, within healthcare systems now. So when you have a mother presenting with sore nipples, and or she's saying that she's in pain, you need to really, really listen to her. A lot of the time, a lot of the problems that is within the NHS is when you look on the surveys and you actually see how mothers are being treated on a racial perspective, you would notice that black mothers are the ones that are more likely to complain about not being listened to, not being given information. So as much as we all sit here, and one of the things that we should know is that within our support in supporting mothers, one of the things is counseling is a part of our job as well, and that goes hand in hand with listening, active listening. Asking active questions is very important as well, in regards to knowing that these mums can speak, but not just respond with a yes or no answer. Yes or no answer isn't going to help you to know exactly what is going on and how to support somebody. So you need to ask them these open questions so they can express what is going on, so you can actually identify the issues and support them as they need to be supported. And if there is language barriers, you need to think about what you can do to overcome that language barrier. There are videos online with the Global Health Media, which has translations of different languages from around the world. So if you don't have anyone in-house that can translate for you to support that mother, then it's about looking and trying to signpost them to where they can get support that would be able to help them with their language barriers. But to leave that mother to not receive any support is not a good job done. And you need to really, giving someone that's got language barriers a leaflet that doesn't have any, no translation of their language, is only, setting them up for failure. It's about, sometimes you may need to speak to their relatives if they have relatives there that speaks English. And sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes it may be necessary to use them to translate, even though sometimes it is recommended not to use relatives. But sometimes if that is what you need to do to help to get some information across, then that is what you need to do. But you need to think outside the box, not limit yourself. So sorry, just because if I know that I'm running behind time, and I would like some of you, whoever would like to ask questions, to have time to ask questions. But I have built a breastfeeding culture safety course, and which is now accredited CPD for breastfeeding practitioners. There will be a discount code that will go out within the actual group, the breastfeeding culture safety group within the app. So if anyone is interested, that will be put out on there later today. And yeah, just really, feel that you're not always going to get it right, and that's okay. But the thing is to be able to learn from your mistakes, and sometimes it's actually reflecting on what mistakes you may have done, or things that you could have maybe have changed or done differently in the past. So with this breastfeeding cultural safety course, it is reflective work. You have to be wanting to do the change, make a change as an individual person to actually navigate through this course, because it will look at you as an individual. You would have to reflect on your own culture. You would have to reflect on other cultures. You'll have to reflect on history, which also does touch bases on slavery. And you would have to then come forward and reflect on the things that you are doing today. And it is a self-assessment course, and there is a bit of reading that will be done, as well as video watching, for you to really check deep within yourself on the changes that you maybe can make within your practice. So how you would navigate through this course wouldn't be always the same as somebody else, because of you'll be working on yourself to then help yourself to be a better practitioner, and to really, take on board of different other cultures. And that's not just black people, for Asians, for different people from around the world, and to help you to navigate through supporting breastfeeding as as treating everyone as equal, and how you would want to be treated. So if anyone has any questions, then feel free to ask. Hello? I've stopped sharing.
I've got a question. I just wondering what you or what every other people have think, where they think the bias that black and brown skinned women can just all feed comes from. Because I was saying before, I used to be a paediatrician, and I don't think that's one of the biases that I felt I noticed in paediatricians. I don't, but so I'm interested to know where that came from. I know there are lots of other biases, and I know that some of those I hold and have held, and but that is one I haven't really perceived. And I'm wondering if that's something that you think is actually even inlaid in a nursing course, in a midwifery course, or just it's part of the wider culture in this country.
I think there's a mixture of things. One of them is that black people are also known to be wet nurses. So they did do jobs as wet nurses. Like other cultures did it, but there was a really big demand in black people to do to wet nurse other babies, and to wet nurse white babies in slavery time, and to leave their babies to starve, because sometimes they wasn't allowed to share their breast with a white baby as well as their baby. Also, because of there was a I couldn't say there was evidence, but there was a thing that was gone round within the white community, that black people breast milk helps protect their babies away from different illnesses and diseases. So they tried to look at black milk as a different and better milk than white mother's milk. So some of these issues that was in history has also trickled down, and things like when black African mothers are in Africa, before it was westernized and formula was pushed on them, a lot of the time, majority of the time, it is more natural of a thing for them to do community wise, is to breastfeed. And if they didn't breastfeed, sometimes maybe the auntie would help to feed their babies and so forth. So I think what's happened is that some of this is come from them, as well as seeing that, like, I've had a midwife, a white midwife, Irish white midwife, that said to me just a year ago, she always assumed that black people didn't have any problem with breastfeeding. And I said, what made you think that? Because if they have really big families, I never ever. And she really just, she couldn't say where it come from, but she's like, they've got so much family that she just assumed that they'll be able to breastfeed their babies. So then when you have people with this in mind, and they're most likely sharing their thoughts with others, like they should be all right, they should be all right. Also, it's like like generally most mothers would first, when they've had their baby, they would naturally try to put their baby to their breast. And what happens if what they're lacking in information on what it's supposed to feel like, what's going on, knowing that it's not supposed to hurt, they're less likely to then reach out and say, excuse me, like, I need some help and support. And when you're not being listened to, and you've grown up not being listened to, not having your concerns taken seriously, you're less likely to ask for the help. But when you know that when you ask for help, it gets delivered, you're more likely to ask for it. So what tends to happen, the people that do tend to ask for the help more are white mums. And sometimes that's because of their education antenatally. They may have got more education around what they want to do and how they want to feed their baby. But also they know that when they ask for help, their help is normally given. So then there's that where, so then the assumption then sits back with the people that are working within that setting, thinking that, you know, that mum has been breastfeeding and she's been fine, but not knowing that that mum has been breastfeeding and her nipples are really sore, but she don't know that having sore nipples is not okay and is not normal, but she's just going through it. So we've made an assumption that she's breastfeeding okay because we didn't think to ask her, how is breastfeeding going? How is it feeling for you? We've just assumed that she's got her baby on the breast and it's going fine. She's just getting on with it. And having that in mind and just thinking, I've always just noticed that they just get on with it. It's also building up that barrier, because if you've already just assumed that they just get on with it and they just do well. But you've only, especially in the hospital, you've only seen them for a very short period of time. So when their nipples are sore, when they're going home, they just can't wait to get a formula bottle to give to their baby, because if they're like going through all that pain and trauma, not actually realizing that breastfeeding is not supposed to be painful. Like a lot of, if you speak to people, they'll be like, they'll start with the conversation like, "Oh, that pain, you're gonna feel that pain when you're breastfeeding your baby." And if they know that breastfeeding is not supposed to be painful, they'll have a lot more of a positive narrative that they'll be sharing around breastfeeding before breastfeeding is started. So there's lots of different things that has been building that within our society in regards to that they know how to breastfeed. And yeah, this is what we need to speak to everyone, and everyone needs to just know that that's not always the case.